Something was wrong. How the hell did I come home to this? The day I got back from Africa, I threw the emerald I bought for my wife straight into the trash. I will never, for the rest of my life, forget the sight of her, 5 months pregnant, wrapped in another man's arms. He drugged me, she sobbed. I laughed and called the cops. Hello, 911? I need to report a possible drugging and sexual assault. If they were going to destroy my marriage, I was going to make damn sure I destroyed their lives. The jolt of the plane landing woke me from a dead sleep. My fingers instinctively went to the raw emerald in my pocket. Over the past 2 months, I had worried it so much that its surface was now as smooth as glass. Dr. Cole, thank you for your service, a flight attendant said with a warm smile. We appreciate your 2 years of contributions to the medical aid mission in Africa. I just nodded, not trusting my voice. The truth was, I'd ended my tour a week early. I hadn't even told the hospital, and I certainly hadn't told Chloe. I wanted it to be a surprise. Stepping out of O'Hare, I took a deep breath of the familiar Chicago air. 2 years, over 700 days and nights. I delivered babies in refugee camps in the Congo and performed amputations in field hospitals in Ethiopia. Every time I saw Chloe's face on a video call, it was the only thing that kept me going. The Willows in Oak Brook, I told the cab driver, giving him the address of the home Chloe and I had bought after we got married. The driver eyed me in the rearview mirror, just back from overseas. Yeah, haven't been home in 2 years. I stared out the window as the cityscape blurred past. Chicago had changed so much, I barely recognized parts of it. Bet your wife's missed you like crazy, the driver said with a chuckle. I didn't answer, just tightened my grip on the stone in my pocket. I imagined Chloe's face when she saw me. Would she scream and leap into my arms? Or would her eyes well up as she playfully punched my chest, asking why I didn't tell her I was coming home early? It was just before dawn when the taxi pulled into our gated community. I paid the fare and stood in front of our house, dragging my suitcase behind me. The yard was overgrown with weeds. Chloe's prize-winning rose garden was completely barren. I frowned. She used to be out there every single day, tending to those flowers. I pulled out my key, but it wouldn't fit. The lock had been changed. Luckily, I remembered the spare key was hidden under the third flower pot on the porch. My fingers closed around the cold metal, and I felt a wave of relief. I pushed the door open, and a strange scent hit me. It wasn't Chloe's usual jasmine perfume. It was a cloying mix of baby powder and some cheap men's cologne. The living room was littered with baby supplies. Bottles, diapers, tiny little socks. A sharp, throbbing pain started in my temples. We'd been married for 5 years and had never been able to have kids. Where did all this come from? Then I heard muffled voices and a soft laugh from upstairs. I left my suitcase by the door and crept up the stairs. The master bedroom door was cracked open, a sliver of warm, yellow light spilling into the hallway. "Ryan, stop it. You'll hurt the baby," came Chloe's voice, laced with a playful coyness I'd never heard before. "What's there to be scared of? You're 5 months along. He's perfectly safe," an unfamiliar male voice answered with a smug laugh. "Besides, your husband doesn't get back until tomorrow, right?" What the fuck? My whole life's been stolen from under me. Who is this son of a bitch? My fingers froze on the doorknob, the blood turning to ice in my veins. Through the crack in the door, I saw Chloe, half reclined on our bed, as a young man leaned over and kissed her neck. But the real gut punch was the unmistakable swell of her belly, clearly visible in the morning light. "What the hell are you doing?" My voice was a shard of ice. The two on the bed sprang apart, as if electrocuted. Chloe's face went white. Her lips trembled. "Ethan, how are you back? You weren't supposed to be here until..." My gaze shifted from her obviously pregnant stomach to the young man's face. He looked to be about 23, maybe 24, handsome, and now staring back at me with pure defiance. "Who is this?" I asked, biting off each word. "I'm Ryan Shaw," the kid said, pausing for effect. "Chloe's partner." Chloe scrambled to my side, grabbing my arm. "Ethan, please, let me explain." Ryan drugged me. I woke up, and then I found out I was pregnant. I couldn't get an abortion. It's a life. I let out a short, harsh laugh that dropped the temperature in the room. "Drugged you? Then why didn't you call the police?" Chloe's eyes widened, her lips moving but no words coming out. Or maybe my voice was terrifyingly calm. There was no drugging. Maybe you were a willing participant. Ryan stood up, He was shorter than me by half a head, but carried himself with an air of superiority. Look, Dr. Cole, it is what it is. Why don't we talk about this like adults? Chloe told me she stopped loving you a long time ago. Your marriage was. My fist moved faster than his words. I wasn't wasting my breath on him. He didn't deserve it. A hard right hook smashed into his face, sending him stumbling back against the wall, blood gushing from his nose. Ethan, what are you doing? Chloe shrieked, trying to get out of bed. I ignored her. I grabbed Ryan by the collar and hit him again, a clean shot to the jaw that sent a tooth flying. He crumpled to the floor, whimpering, all of his earlier arrogance gone. Under Illinois state law, that's aggravated battery, which carries a sentence of 2 to 5 years, I said coldly, pulling out my phone. But before we get to that, let's deal with the drugging allegation. Since Chloe is accusing you of sexual assault, we should let the law handle it. I dialed 911. Hello, I need to report a crime. Don't. Chloe lunged for my phone, but I sidestepped her easily. She fell to the floor in a heap of tears. Ethan, please don't do this. Making a scene won't be good for anyone. I hung up before the dispatcher could answer and looked down at my wife. You have 2 choices. 1, we get a divorce, effective immediately, and you walk away with nothing. 2, I press charges, sue you both, and I start digging into your little boyfriend background. I have a feeling this isn't his first rodeo. Ryan clutched his bleeding mouth, his eyes darting nervously. I knew that look. It was guilt. I'd seen on 1,000 faces in Africa, on criminals and liars right before they were exposed. I'll take the first option, Chloe sobbed. I nodded and pulled my laptop from my briefcase. I'll draft the divorce papers right now. Be at the county clerk's office tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock. I turned to Ryan. As for you, get the hell out of my house now. Or the next punch will make sure you're drinking your meals through a straw for 6 months. Ryan scrambled to his feet and scurried out. At the door, he turned back. Ethan Cole, don't get cocky. Chloe's family's medical supply company is completely dependent on my uncle's distribution channels. You make a move against me and... I took 1 step forward, and he bolted. I heard the front door slam shut. I turned to look at Chloe, still sobbing on the floor. So that's what this is about. She lowered her head, saying nothing, which was all the confirmation I needed. I scoffed and started packing a bag with my essentials. When I left 2 years ago, Vance Medical was on the brink of bankruptcy. I was the one who used my contacts with international aid organizations to get them the contracts in Africa that saved their asses. It seemed that while I was gone, the Vances had found themselves a new cash cow. Just as I was zipping my bag, the doorbell rang furiously. I went downstairs and opened it. My mother-in-law, Eleanor Vance, CEO of Vance Medical, stood on the porch. Ethan, how dare you assault him? She screeched the moment she stepped inside. I brought Ryan in to help the company. Do you have any idea how much we rely on his uncle's supply chain? My face was a mask of stone. So he gets to sleep with my wife as a bonus for helping the company. Eleanor's expression faltered for a second before hardening again into that familiar, condescending glare. Chloe told me everything. Ryan took advantage of her. It's in the past. There's a child on the way. Can't you be the bigger person here? The bigger person? I sneered. Sure. How about this? I'll go get a vasectomy tomorrow and dedicate my life to raising Chloe's baby. Is that big enough for you, Eleanor? She was speechless, her face turning purple with rage. Mom, stop it. Chloe came down the stairs in her pajamas, her eyes swollen and red. Eleanor turned on her daughter. Chloe, don't you worry. Your mother is here. If Ethan Cole dares to divorce you, I'll make sure he's blacklisted from every hospital in this state. I pulled out my phone and played the audio I'd recorded a few minutes earlier. Ryan's voice filled the room, clear as day. Chloe told me she stopped loving you a long time ago. I hit pause. Mrs. Vance, are you sure you want to escalate this? Adultery makes for a messy divorce. The media loves a good high society scandal. Eleanor's face went chalk white. Vance Medical's reputation was already shaky. A scandal like this would destroy it. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock, City Hall. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. I slammed it shut behind me, not bothering to look back at the expressions on their faces. The night air was cold on my face. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in a long time. Ava, it's Ethan Cole. About that African medical project you mentioned last year. I've thought it over. I'm in. After hanging up, I took the raw emerald from my pocket and tossed it into a curbside garbage can. Son of a bitch. Just like that, my life was over. I stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of my hotel room, looking out at the glittering Chicago skyline. It had been 3 days since I'd left my home. My phone was overflowing with missed calls and texts from Chloe, Eleanor, even a few colleagues from the hospital. I ignored them all. On the desk, my laptop screen glowed with the document I just finished, divorce agreement draft. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mark Riley, my best friend since kindergarten. He was a department head at the FDA now. Mark, it's me. Ethan, I've got something on that thing you asked me to look into. Mark said, his voice low. Vance Medical started sourcing catheters and stents from a company called Shaw Diagnostics last year. 3 separate batches have had official quality complaints filed against them. My knuckles went wide around my whiskey glass. What kind of problems? Stents fracturing, catheters leaking. But every single complaint was buried, Mark said. And what's weirder, Shaw Diagnostics has a registered capital of only $500,000, yet they're landing these multi-million-dollar contracts. And Ryan Shaw's uncle is the owner? That's right. And get this. Mark's voice dropped even lower. I found a record of Ryan Shaw being involved in a similar scandal at another medical firm a couple of years back. The CEO's daughter nearly killed herself over him. A cold smile touched my lips. So he's a predator. Mark, can you send me the documentation on those complaints? Already in your inbox. Ethan, what are you planning to do? First, get the divorce, I said, staring into the night. Then, make the people who need to pay. After the call, I opened my email. Mark had sent everything. Complaint logs, lab reports, even a few gruesome photos of patients who had developed post-op complications. My trained, I could immediately tell the material used in those stents was dangerously substandard. Just as I was downloading the files, the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. It was Chloe, her eyes puffy and red, holding a thermal container. I opened the door but blocked the entrance with my body. What do you want? Ethan, her voice trembled. I made you some soup. It's your favorite, the beef stew. I'm not hungry, I said flatly. Just be at the courthouse tomorrow. She suddenly grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. Ethan, I know I messed up. It was Ryan. He seduced me. He said he could save my family's company and my mother. She kept pressuring me to have a baby. I shook her hand off. So you saved the company by sleeping with him? By getting pregnant with a child? You could have talked to me, Chloe. We were married for 5 years, while I spent 2 years in Africa, performing a dozen surgeries a month just so I could get home to you sooner. My voice started to shake with rage. Do you have any idea that I contracted malaria my first week there? I had a fever of 104 and almost died in that damn clinic. But I pulled through because I kept telling myself you were waiting for me. Tears streamed down Chloe's face. Ethan, 9 o'clock tomorrow. Don't be late. I shut the door in her face. Leaning against it, I took several deep breaths to steady myself. I went back to the desk and continued compiling my evidence. In addition to what Mark sent, I logged into Vance Medical's internal server. The password was still Chloe's birthday. She never changed it. The financial statements that popped up made me narrow my eyes. In the last quarter of last year, Vance Medical's procurement cost had suddenly jumped by 30%, while their sales had dropped by 15%. That timeline lined up perfectly with when Shaw Diagnostics became their main supplier. Kickbacks, I muttered. That would explain why such a shoddy product was getting approved. As I was taking screenshots, my phone rang again. A number I didn't recognize. Hello, a woman's voice asked. My name is Lauren Webb. I'm a reporter with Medical Frontier. I was hoping to ask you a few questions about your time with the African Aid Mission. I frowned. How did you know I was back in the country? Well, she hesitated. We received an anonymous tip that you'd ended your mission early. The source also provided some interesting material. My stomach dropped. What kind of material? A photograph of your wife with a Mr. Ryan Shaw, she said, pausing for a beat, and a copy of your wife's medical records confirming her pregnancy. I gripped the phone tightly. This had to be Eleanor or Ryan. They were trying to get ahead of the story by smearing me in the press. Ms. Webb, I'd advise you not to run that story just yet, I said, my voice calm, because I have a much bigger one for you. One involving defective medical devices and corporate bribery. There was a moment of silence on the other end. You're talking about the cafe in the Aeon Center. 2 o'clock tomorrow. Bring your recorder. I hung up. The next morning, I arrived at the county clerk's office half an hour early. Chloe was 20 minutes late. She looked pale and drained, and Eleanor was nowhere in sight. My mom. She doesn't want us to get a divorce, Chloe said in a low voice. She hid my driver's license and our marriage certificate. I pulled copies from my briefcase. I came prepared. The process was surprisingly quick. When the clerk asked for the reason for divorce, Chloe just stared at the floor. I answered for her, my voice even. Irreconcilable differences. When the final stamp hit the divorce decree, Chloe suddenly grabbed my hand. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I know what I did was wrong. Please, give me one more chance. I can terminate the pregnancy. I pull my hand away. Don't. I wish you and your child all the best. Walking out of the courthouse, the sunlight was blinding. Chloe followed me, sobbing, Ethan, Ryan, he never loved me. As soon as my mother's company became dependent on his uncle, he changed. I stopped, and I regret it, she wept. It's always been you that I loved. I turned to face her. Chloe, when you love someone, you don't crawl into another man's bed the second they leave the country. When you love someone, you don't get 5 months pregnant and try to lie about it. I gestured toward her stomach. Go be a mother to your child. He deserves that much. I walked away without looking back, her heart-wrenching cries echoing behind me. But strangely, I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought I would. I just felt numb. At 2 o'clock, I was at the cafe. Lauren Webb was already there, a sharp-looking woman in her early 30s. Dr. Cole, thanks for meeting me, she said, handing me her card. You mentioned a news tip. I placed a USB drive on the table. On this drive, you'll find proof that Vance Medical knowingly used substandard medical devices, along with evidence of commercial bribery involving Shaw Diagnostics. Lauren's eyes lit up. This is explosive. But why are you giving this to me? Vance Medical is your ex-wife's family company. That's exactly why I know the truth, I said, meeting her gaze. Ms. Webb, I have only one condition. The story has to be factual and objective. No sensationalism. She nodded. Of course. She paused. For what it's worth, we received an anonymous tip alleging that you had an affair with a local nurse during your time in Africa. They even provided a photo. I let out a cold laugh. Can I see it? Lauren handed me her tablet. On the screen was a photo of me at the field hospital in Ethiopia, demonstrating CPR on a black nurse. That's the head nurse for the Ethiopian Red Cross. I was training her team in emergency response techniques, I said, shaking my head. What exactly is this photo supposed to prove? The source claimed this was the reason you came home early. I came home early because my mission objectives were completed ahead of schedule. I took out my phone and pulled up a document. This is my official commendation from the International Medical Corps. My final performance review is clearly marked outstanding. Lauren examined the document, a look of apology on her face. I'm sorry, Dr. Cole. It seems we were almost used. It's fine, I said, putting my phone away. But I would be very interested to know who this source was. She hesitated for a moment. The email was anonymous, but the IP address traced back to the Vance Medical Building. Just as I suspected, Eleanor would stoop to anything to protect her company and her daughter's reputation, even slander. After leaving the cafe, I got a call from Ava Sterling. Dr. Cole, have you given our offer any more thought? Her voice was crisp and professional. Our project in Africa is in desperate need of a physician with your field experience. I've made my decision. I'll join you, I said, looking out at the sun. I just need to take care of a few things here first. Of course, Ava said. She paused. I heard you're getting a divorce. I was a little surprised. News travels fast. It's a small world, she said softly. Ethan, some people aren't worth your grief. I'm not grieving, I said, taking a deep breath. I'm just taking out the trash. I hung up and headed for the parking garage. Just as I unlocked my car, 3 large men surrounded me. Dr. Cole, right? The bald one in the lead sneered. Someone sent us with a message. Mind your own business. Next time, it won't be just a friendly chat. I calmly sized them up. Ryan Shaw sent you. Smart guy, the man said, patting my cheek. Mister, Shaw said if you dare leak that information to the press, you'll never work in a hospital again. I grabbed his wrist and twisted. As a surgeon, I have an intimate knowledge of every joint and pressure point in the human body. And my grandfather, a former Marine, taught me a few things about self-defense. Act. The man cried out, dropping to his knees. His two buddies started to move in, but I held up my phone, the screen showing it was recording audio. That's assault and witness intimidation. That's a felony, carries 5 years, minimum, I said, releasing his wrist. Tell Ryan Shaw that I've already given copies of all my evidence to my lawyer. If anything happens to me, that data goes straight to the FDA and every major news outlet in the country. The three men exchanged glances, then scurried away. I sat in my car, my hands finally starting to shake. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Ryan and Eleanor wouldn't give up this easily. I had to be ready for an all-out war. Starting the car, I glanced in the rearview mirror. I saw the dark circles under my eyes, and I thought I could even see a few new gray hairs at my temples. In just a few days, I felt like I had aged 10 years. But my eyes were clearer and more determined than ever. They wanted a war. I'd give them a battle they would never forget. 3 the morning sun cut through a gap in the hotel curtains, stinging my eyes. I checked my phone. 6:30 M. I couldn't sleep. The encounter with those thugs last night was a clear sign that Ryan and the Van Cess were getting desperate. I took a cold shower, trying to clear my head. The man in the mirror was unshaven, with dark bags under his eyes, but his gaze was sharp. Today was a big day. I was meeting with my lawyer to officially launch my counterattack. The coffee machine beeped, filling the suite with a rich aroma. I took my mug to the desk and opened my laptop. 3 new emails were waiting. The first was from Mark at the FDA, with more internal documents detailing the dealings between Shaw Diagnostics and Vance Medical. The second was from Lauren Webb at Medical Frontier, with a draft of her questions for our interview. The third was from Chloe Vance. The subject line read, "Please." I deleted the third email without opening it and clicked on Mark's attachments. This new batch of files was even more damning than the first, even including surveillance photos of Ryan's uncle, Jonathan Shaw, meeting with Eleanor Vance. In one photo, Shaw was sliding a thick manila envelope across the table to Eleanor. The smoking gun, I muttered, saving the images. My phone vibrated. It was my lawyer, Mr. Davis. Dr. Cole, I'm in the lobby. I'll be right down. Mr. Davis was recommended by a mentor, a legal heavyweight with a reputation for never losing a case. As the elevator descended, I ran through my objectives for the day. First, ensure the divorce settlement was enforced. Second, initiate legal proceedings against both Vance Medical and Shaw Diagnostics. In the lobby cafe, Mr. Davis was waiting. He was a man in his 40s, with a tailored suit and the sharp eyes of a hawk. Dr. Cole, he said, shaking my hand. Did you bring the files? I handed him the USB drive. It's all there. Evidence of commercial bribery, the defective product reports, and the audio recording of me being threatened. Mr. Davis scanned the files on his laptop, a faint smile playing on his lips. This is more than enough. He looked up at me. Are you sure you want to do this? Once we file, there's no going back. The second I walked out of that house, I never planned on looking back, I said, my voice steady. Mr. Davis nodded. Very well. This morning, I will file 2 motions with the court. One to enforce the terms of your divorce agreement, and a second lawsuit against Vance Medical and Shaw Diagnostics for corporate fraud and product liability. And witness intimidation, I added. Precisely. I've already contacted the police. They'll be pulling the hotel's security footage to identify those 3 individuals. Mr. Davis closed his laptop. However, Dr. Cole, I advise you to be careful for the next few days. When a cornered animal gets desperate, it can be unpredictable. I know, I cut him off. I'm ready. After he left, I took a taxi to the hospital. I was still technically on leave, but I needed to collect my personal belongings and speak with the hospital director. Northwestern Memorial. I used to be so proud to work here. Walking down the familiar hallways, I noticed a few colleagues giving me strange looks. Some pretended not to see me. Others offered a sympathetic glance. Dr. Cole. Lisa, the head nurse, hurried over to me, her voice a hushed whisper. What are you doing here, Mrs.? Vance is in the director's office right now. I raised an eyebrow. Perfect. Saves me the trouble of explaining things more than once. The door to Director Miller's office was slightly ajar. I could hear Eleanor's shrill voice inside. How can you keep a doctor with such depraved morals on your staff? He was sleeping around in Africa, and the moment he's back, he's assaulting people. I pushed the door open. Mrs. Vance, spreading libel behind someone's back is hardly a sign of high moral character. The atmosphere in the room turned to ice. Director Miller stood up awkwardly, and Eleanor's face went rigid with fury. Ethan Cole, you have a nerve to show your face here? Eleanor shrieked, pointing a finger at me. We're pressing charges for what you did to Ryan. I calmly placed a folder on the director's desk. Director Miller, this is my work report for my 2 years in Africa, along with my official evaluation from the International Medical Corps. As for Mrs. Vance's accusation of sleeping around, I took out my phone and played the recording of the 3 thugs threatening me. Director Miller's expression shifted from awkwardness to shock. Dr. Cole, what is this? Vance Medical and Shaw Diagnostics are suspected of commercial bribery and distributing defective medical products. I am currently cooperating with an FDA investigation, I said, watching the color drain from Eleanor's face. And in order to cover it up, Mrs. Vance has resorted to slander. Eleanor shot to her feet. You're lying, Director. Don't listen to a word he says. Mrs. Vance, I interrupted. Would you like me to call Lauren Webb at Medical Frontier right now and have her publish those photos? The ones of Jonathan Shaw sliding you an envelope full of cash. Eleanor looked like a fish gasping for air, her mouth opening and closing silently. Director Miller sighed. Dr. Cole, your performance here has always been exemplary, but this is a complex situation. The board will likely require you to take a temporary leave of absence, pending an internal investigation. I hope you'll tell your friend at the FDA this is just standard procedure. That won't be necessary, I said, placing my pre-written resignation letter on his desk. I came today to clean out my office. Mark already knows. When I left the director's office, I found a small crowd of nurses and doctors gathered in the hallway. They parted silently to let me through. Someone whispered, "Stay strong, Dr. Cole." In that moment, their quiet support meant more than anything. After packing up my office, I was about to leave when I ran into Chloe at the elevators. She looked haggard and exhausted, her eyes so swollen they were almost shut. Ethan, she said, grabbing my sleeve. I didn't know what my mother was doing. I had nothing to do with those rumors. I pulled my arm away. Does it matter? Yes, she cried. I love you. I know I made a mistake. Please, just give me one more chance. Chloe, I looked at her, my voice devoid of all emotion. Do you know what disgusts me the most? It's not the betrayal. It's this pathetic, fake act you're putting on right now. I pointed at her stomach. Put your hand on your heart and ask yourself if the baby in your belly was really conceived because you were drugged. Her face froze, her lips trembling as she failed to form a response. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside without a second glance. Just before the doors closed, I heard her scream, "Ethan Cole, you'll regret this." Stepping out of the hospital, the bright sun made my eyes ache. My phone rang. It was Mr. Davis. Dr. Cole, the lawsuits have been filed. The court has accepted our evidence and issued an order to freeze a portion of the assets of both Vance Medical and Shaw Diagnostics, pending a full investigation. That was fast. The evidence you provided was overwhelming. I've never had such an airtight case. Mr. Davis said, a hint of excitement in his voice. And I just got word. The FDA conducted a surprise inspection of Shaw Diagnostics' warehouse. They found pallets of non-compliant products. I hung up and let out a long breath. Mark really came through. Round 1 victory, but this was far from over. I took a cab to a coffee shop in the Loop where Lauren Webb was waiting. She looked even more professional today, her recorder and camera already on the table. Dr. Cole, is it true the FDA rated Shaw Diagnostics this morning? She asked before I even sat down. I nodded, and the courts have frozen their assets. Her eyes widened. Can you tell me everything? For the next 2 hours, I laid it all out. The story of how Vance Medical had fallen from a reputable company into this mess, and how Ryan Shaw had manipulated his way into Chloe's life. I kept my personal feelings out of it, focusing only on the corporate corruption and the risks to public health. This is a massive story, Lauren said, her expression serious. But I have to verify every single detail before I could publish. Of course, I said, handing her another USB drive. This has originals of all the evidence. I paused. I'd prefer it if you kept my personal situation out of the article. Lauren nodded in understanding. Don't worry. Our focus will be on patient safety. It was getting dark when I left the cafe. As I waited for a ride, I noticed a familiar black Mercedes parked across the street. Ryan's car. The window rolled down, and I could see his scowling face. I met his gaze without flinching until my Uber arrived. As I got in, I saw the Mercedes pull out and start to follow me. Sir, could you just drive around for a bit before heading back to the hotel? I told the driver. I think I'm being followed. The driver glanced in his rearview mirror. Want me to call the cops? No, thanks. Just lose them. He was an old pro. A few sharp turns through the downtown grid, and the Mercedes was gone. Back at the hotel, I notified the front desk and asked for extra security. The moment I got to my room, my phone rang. Another unknown number. Ethan Cole. You've got a lot of nerve, came Ryan's cold voice. You think this is enough to take us down? The law is the law, Ryan, I said, turning on my phone's recorder. What's the matter? Sending your thugs didn't work, so now you have to call me yourself? Don't give me that high and mighty bullshit, he snarled. You're just pissed because you got cheated on. Let me tell you something. The baby in Chloe's belly is mine, and Vance Medical will be mine soon enough. Are you done? I asked calmly, because this recording will make a nice piece of supplemental evidence in court tomorrow. There was a pause, then a cold laugh. Ethan, you think you've won? Just you wait. He hung up. I immediately called Mr. Davis and told him what happened. That's a direct threat, Mr. Davis said, his voice grim. Dr. Cole, I strongly advise you to stay somewhere else tonight. No need, I said, looking at the deadbolt on my door. The hotel security is solid. I'll see you at the hearing tomorrow. After the call, I stood by the window, gazing out at the Chicago night. This city held so many of my memories. The long nights studying in med school, the adrenaline of my first solo surgery, the joy on Chloe's face when I proposed. Now it was all just smoke. But strangely, I didn't feel sad. I felt a sense of relief, of release. Like excising a malignant tumor. The procedure is painful, but it's necessary for survival. My phone rang again. This time, it was Ava Sterling. Ethan, everything is ready for you here in Africa. When can you fly out? She asked, straight to the point. Give me a week. I calculated. As soon as the legal proceedings are wrapped up. Good, she said. She paused. Do you need any help? No, I can handle it. Then I remembered something. Actually, does your project have a need for medical equipment? Of course. We're always short on supplies, especially cardiac stents and catheters. A small smile formed on my lips. I might know a source. Quality products, 30% below market price. Really? Ava's voice was suddenly excited. What's the source? You'll find out in a few days, I said mysteriously. It could be a very big surprise. After we hung up, a wave of exhaustion finally hit me. I lay down on the bed and started planning my next moves, tomorrow's court hearing, the meeting with the FDA, and how to deal with Vance Medical's inventory of legitimate products. Every step had to be perfect. Before I closed my eyes, I glanced at a picture frame on the nightstand. It was a photo of Chloe and me at our medical school graduation, our smiles bright and full of hope. It seemed like a cruel joke now. I picked up the frame and placed it face down on the table. The past was the past. The sun would rise tomorrow, and my new life was just beginning. The court's decision came faster than I ever could have imagined. 3 days later, a call from Mr. Davis woke me from a deep sleep. Dr. Cole, we won. His voice was electric with excitement. The court upheld the divorce agreement. Vance Medical has been ordered to pay you a settlement of $2 million for emotional distress and division of assets. Shaw Diagnostics has been shut down, and Jonathan Shaw was just arrested by the FBI for commercial bribery. I rubbed my temples and looked at the clock. 6:20 a.m. The Chicago sunrise was just beginning to paint the sky. What about Ryan? The little weasel skipped town. Flew to the Cayman Islands last night, Mr. Davis said with a sneer. But with his uncle's empire crumbling, he won't be a problem for long. I hung up and pulled open the curtains, letting the sunlight flood the room. This should have been a moment for celebration, but all I felt was a profound sense of calm. The thrill of revenge was fleeting, leaving behind nothing but an empty space. My phone buzzed. A text from Ava Sterling saw the news. Congratulations. We're ready for you in Africa whenever you are. I replied with a simple thank you and started to pack. The last week had been a nightmare, and it was finally time to wake up. That afternoon, I met Lauren Webb in the Loop. Her article was the front-page story in Medical Frontier with a headline, "The Rot Within, How Defective Stents Ended Up in Top Hospitals." Dr. Cole, your story has made a huge impact, Lauren said, handing me a copy of the paper. The Department of Health has already launched a federal investigation. I scanned the article. It was objective and factual, with no mention of my personal life, focusing entirely on the issue of patient safety. It was exactly what I had wanted. Thank you for your integrity, I said sincerely. Those defective products have hurt too many people. They needed to be exposed. Lauren hesitated. Vance Medical released a statement this morning. They're claiming to be victims, that all the fault lies with Shaw Diagnostics. A likely story, I scoffed. What about the bribery? What about the kickbacks Eleanor took? That's the strange part, Lauren said, lowering her voice. Eleanor Vance walked into the district attorney's office this morning and confessed. She admitted to taking bribes from Jonathan Shaw, but claimed every cent went back into company operations, not her own pocket. I raised an eyebrow. That didn't sound like Eleanor. She was too proud to ever admit defeat. Unless Chloe took over the company, didn't she? Lauren nodded. She was named interim CEO this morning. She looked hesitant to continue. Dr. Cole, Chloe contacted me last night. She said she wants to see you one last time. I put down my coffee cup. That won't be necessary. My flight to Africa is tomorrow. Leaving the cafe, on some strange impulse, I took a taxi out to Oak Brook. I had no desire to see Chloe, but I wanted one last look at the place I once called home. The gates were locked, and the weeds in the yard were even taller. Through the iron bars, I could see the living room curtains were drawn, but a light was on inside. For some reason, I remembered the day we first moved in 5 years ago. Chloe had run through every room, excitedly pointing out where the sofa would go, where we would hang our pictures. Ethan, the familiar voice made me freeze. I turned. Chloe was standing a few feet away, holding a bag of groceries. She had lost a lot of weight, and even her loose-fitting dress couldn't hide the prominent curve of her stomach. We stared at each other in silence for a few moments before she spoke. I had a feeling you might come. I left something behind. I lied. In the study. She nodded and unlocked the gate. Come in. The house looked mostly the same, but it was filled with a strange smell, a mix of herbal medicine and baby powder. I walked straight to the study and pretended to look for something. In reality, there was only one thing I wanted, the collector's edition of Gray's Anatomy my mentor had given me in medical school. It represented the start of my career. Ethan, Chloe said, standing in the doorway, her voice thick with emotion. My mother confessed. I closed the book without turning around. I know. The company is a wreck. Our suppliers have all canceled their contracts. The bank is calling in our loans. Her voice trembled. I don't know what to do. That's your problem now, I said, turning to face her. We're divorced, remember? Tears streamed down her face. I know I have no right to ask you for help, but for the sake of the 5 years we had. The 5 years we had? I laughed, a cold, empty sound. Chloe, when you were carrying his child, did you ever once think about our 5 years? I pointed at her belly. She covered her face and began to sob. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Ryan was a monster. He only got close to me to get control of my family's company. What good does saying that do now? I said, walking toward the door with my book. Good luck. She suddenly grabbed my arm. Wait. She pulled a check from her pocket. This is the settlement from the court. I know it's not enough to make up for. I glanced at the check. $1. $2 million. The full amount. I was surprised. I had assumed with Vance Medical's finances in shambles, they would have tried to delay the payment. Thank you, I said, taking the check. Take care of yourself. As I walked out the front door, I could hear Chloe's cries behind me. Ethan, did you ever love me? I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. The question was meaningless now. The next morning, I was at O'Hare, Terminal 5. I checked my luggage, carrying only my copy of Gray's Anatomy and a small carry-on. Before going through security, I looked at my phone one last time. Over a dozen missed calls, all from Chloe, and one new text message, Ethan, I'm going to terminate the pregnancy. The doctors say it's risky, but I can't live with this shame. If something happens to me, please forgive me. I stare at the message for a long time. Finally, I type back 2 words, live well. Then I turned off my phone and boarded the plane. As the plane took off, I watched Chicago shrink below me. 2 years ago, I had left this city full of hope, counting the days until my return. Today, all I wanted was to fly as far away as possible. 12 hours later, the plane landed. When the cabin door opened, a wave of heat and the familiar, earthy smell of Africa washed over me. It felt strangely like coming home. Dr. Cole, over here. I looked toward the arrival's gate and saw Ava Sterling, dressed in a crisp white pantsuit that stood out in the crowd. She looked even more formidable in person than she did on video calls, with her sharp, intelligent eyes and shoulder-length hair. "Welcome to Africa," she said, taking my carry-on. "Was the flight okay?" "Not bad," I said, following her at the parking lot. "Thanks for coming to get me." Ava's SUV was parked in the VIP section, the logo for her company, Apex Medical Group, emblazoned on the side. Once we were in the car, she handed me a bottle of cold water. "It's a 2-hour drive to the facility. You should hydrate." As we drove out of the city, the modern buildings gave way to the breathtaking vistas of the African savanna. Ava gave me a brief overview of the project. Apex Medical had facilities in 5 different African countries. The one I was headed to, just outside Addis Ababa, was their largest combined medical center, training facility, and research hub. "You'll be the new director of medicine, in charge of the surgical team and all training programs," Ava said, glancing at me. "The pay might not be what you're used to back in the States, but I don't care about the money." I cut her off. "I just want to do meaningful work." Ava smiled. "Good. By the way, about that medical equipment source you mentioned." "Vance Medical," I said, looking straight ahead. "They have a massive surplus of high-quality, fully certified stents and catheters they need to liquidate. I can broker a deal for you. 40% below market price." Ava let out a low whistle. "That would be a godsend." She hesitated. "Given your history with Avances." "It's purely business," I said calmly. "They need cash. We need equipment. It's a win-win." Ava nodded thoughtfully and didn't press the issue. 2 hours later, we pulled into a large modern compound. Behind high walls were several white buildings. At the center, the flags of the United States and Ethiopia flew side by side. "Welcome to Apex Africa headquarters," Ava said with pride. "We have 200 beds, 3 state-of-the-art operating rooms, and the best training facility on the continent." She gave me a full tour and introduced me to the senior staff. Everyone treated me with an almost reverential respect, which made me slightly uncomfortable. Finally, Ava led me to my quarters, a small, private villa inside the medical compound. "Get some rest. Shake off the jet lag," she said from the doorway. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'll introduce you to your first group of trainees." After she left, I looked around my new home. The furniture was simple but functional. On the desk was a new laptop and a stack of medical journals. I took out my phone and, after a moment's hesitation, turned it on. Dozens of unread messages flooded in, most of them from Chloe. The most recent one had been sent 2 hours ago. "The procedure is over. I made it. The baby is gone. Ethan, I'm so sorry. I wish you happiness." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't reply. Putting the phone down, I walked to the window and watched a herd of gazelles racing across the distant savannah. Out here, no one knew my past. No one would look at me with pity or scorn. I could start over. I could just be Dr. Cole, a doctor, nothing more. End.